Oh, wait. All right, so for the graphs, I'm going to put them up. You match yours. If you have questions, we'll talk about that. So starting with the first two. Each graph was worth 3 points. One for graphing each line correctly and one for the correct solution. Make sure your lines have arrows because they're not lines without them. They're just line segments. Make sure you have as many points plotted as possible. Fill up your graph. Your line should be going in the same direction as whatever it says. For number 1, your solution was -3, 4. For number 2, your solution was no solution. Questions on either of those two? What did I just say?
Yeah,
I just was reading stuff off this. So if you did not have those before, make sure you fix them. That way you know what mistakes to not do for the test. 3 and 4, again, you have to draw both lines correctly. Make sure the slope and y-intercept were correct. Make sure your solution is there. Some of you are having issues with the y = 4. If you don't remember which is which, your Hoylux, it is on the vocab wall. But it should be a horizontal line at 4. Make sure the point is there. And then for that one, the solution was -1, 4. For number 4, the solution was 3, -1. So again, make sure you have arrows. Make sure all of your points are plotted. Do we have questions on those two? Remember that you can also double check these in your calculator. If you go into your y equals and you put in your equation, you can double check and graph these and see did you graph them correctly. You can also go to the second trace to find where they intersect. Right. So on to the next. For the most part, some of us did this fine, some of us did not. So for number 1 on 3.2, you had to set these equations equal to each other. Then you had to move the variables to one side, everything else to the other. Some of you added 8, some of you added 6. That order did not matter. But when you got here, some of you stopped and said no solution, but that was incorrect. You should have kept going. 0 can be an answer. So you would put 0 back into one of your equations and find y. So the ordered pair or your solution was 0, 1. So this was worth 4 points. 1 for substituting correctly, putting all of the signs and everything, solving for one of the variables, solving for the other, and then the final answer. Questions on that one? Yes. If the variable cancels.
So there's a variable.
Correct. And the numbers don't equal. So 2 = 0, no variable. That would be no solution. Okay. Number 2, you had an equation. Most of you put this in the correct where it's supposed to go. Some of you maybe forgot the minus here, which threw everything else off. If you don't put that minus, it changes the entire equation. Distribute, solve for x. Because some of you didn't put this minus, you distributed the -5 instead, and on the same side, you're just combining like terms, you're not doing opposite things.
Oh, and I just did that wrong.
So as you were solving for x, you should have gotten -3. Some of you are putting your negatives some places and not others, so you're forgetting that it's negative. Double check your math in your calculator. Then you would take that number, put it back into one of your equations, it doesn't matter which one, to solve for y. So this should be -9 plus 7, or y equals -2. So your solution was -3, -2. So again, that one was worth 4 points, one for substituting correctly, one for solving for one of the variables, solving for the other variable, and then the solution. Questions on that one? For the most part, the first 3, or at least 2 and 3, weren't our issue problems. It was really 1 and 4. Right, so same thing for number 3. Take this equation, put it in for y, which most of you got this one right. And then start to solve. As you combine your like terms, this becomes a positive 24x. And then as you keep solving, this becomes 48. Divide both sides by 24. 2 should have been your x. And then put that back in for your y. So that y equals 7. So that ordered pair was 2, 7. So again, that one was worth 4 points. Questions on that one? Number 4, you needed to solve for a variable. Look for the variable that's either close to being by itself, maybe it has a negative in front of it, maybe it has a plus in front of it, or it has nothing in front of it. Solve for that variable. So add 8y to both sides. Some of you were really focused on solving for y, but you didn't need to solve for y. If you put it as 8y minus 10, it'd be the same thing. So solving for one of the variables was worth 1 point, and then everything else is the same. So this problem was worth a little bit more. It was worth 5 instead of 4. Then take that equation and put it back into the first. And then solve for y. Have -30 plus 20y equals 10. Get rid of your 30. And when you divide, y equals 2. after you find your y, put that back in for one of your equations, find x. So x equals negative 10 plus 16, or 6. So your ordered pair for that one would be 2, 6. I'm sorry, 6, 2. I said that backwards. Yes. 8y. So these would cancel, yes, but you're moving it to the other side. Right. Questions on that last one? I guarantee that you will see one like this on your test, so make sure that you solve for your variable first. Just like the quiz, there will be no fractions or decimals for answers. Anyone still writing any of this down before we move on to elimination? For these, they were each worth 4 points. One for showing how you eliminated, one for solving for one variable, one for solving for the other, and then one for your final answer. So for this first one, the only way you could have done this multiple ways, but since you already have 3s, you could start by eliminating those by adding the 2 equations together. So you have to show me that you added, because otherwise I don't know what you did. Negative 7 plus 5 is negative 2y. 13 plus a negative 11 is 2. Y should have been a negative 1. If you got a positive 1, it changed the rest of your work, so be careful with that. And then put that back into one of your problems and solve for x. So when we solve for x, we'd be adding 5 to both sides. So we get negative 6. Some of you weren't putting the negative, which threw off your answer again. But then your solution was negative 2, negative 1. Do we have any questions on that one? Number 2 is very similar because you already have common coefficients. You can eliminate these by subtracting. Subtract everything. So negative 4 minus a negative. Be careful with your negatives. This becomes adding, but you end up with negative y. Negative 20 minus a negative 24, you end up adding. And then divide both sides by negative. So if you didn't double check your math, you may have ended up with a positive 4 instead of a negative 4. Then you can take that and put it back in, solve for x.
Wait, how did you get that?
If we are subtracting negative 4 minus a negative 3 is really negative 4 plus 3. Negative 20 minus negative 24 is really negative 20 plus 24.
So how did you get negative y with 4? Oh, you just did it there?
Because you're subtracting and they're both negative. this really becomes adding. Put your y back into one of the equations, start solving for x. Again, be careful with your negatives. Some of you subtracted 12 but didn't get negative 36, which threw off the answer. So then negative 6, negative 4 was your final answer. Questions on that one? Three and 4, you had to change one or both of the equations so that you had common coefficients. If you started off adding or subtracting right away, that was incorrect because you didn't have common coefficients. So how you did this could be different than how I'm about to do it, and that's okay. Some of you that got to this problem made this 16 by multiplying everything here by 2. Some of you multiplied it by negative 2, so you would subtract instead of add. That does not matter. So looking at these two equations, to eliminate them, I would add the two together. So that 16, negative 16 would cancel. 5 plus 6 would give me 11. And 30 plus 36 would give me 66. Yes, Christina.
Did you have, like, multiply the top by 3 and then the bottom?
Yeah, so there are different ways to do it. It also depends on what you want to eliminate. So as long as your work is correct and you end up with the same answer, then you're good. So y was 6. And then when you put that back in to any of these equations, doesn't matter which one. We have negative 8x plus 18 equals 18. The 18s would cancel. So when you divide, x equals just 0. So your final answer would be 0, 6. So for this one, you could have just multiplied one of them to make them the same. You could have multiplied both. It depends on what you're eliminating. But for number 4, you had to multiply both equations. What you chose to eliminate was up to you. First, I should say. So some of you went the 9-5 route. Some of you did the 9-8. It doesn't matter. So then those became 45x. Sorry, that was wrong. 81x, 45y, and some big number. 261, negative 261. And then negative 40x minus 45y equals negative 140. So if we were eliminating our y's, we would subtract, and you would show that you subtracted somewhere. 81 minus a negative 40 would become adding. And then negative 261 minus a negative 140 would again be adding. So you'd end up with 121 on both sides, but one's negative. So that x equals negative 1. negative 9 minus 5y equals negative 29. Add 9, keep your negative, so that when you divide, you end up with a positive 4. So some of you are getting negative 4 instead. So then your solution would be negative 1/4. Questions on that one? For the last page, I am not going to solve them for lack of time. I will set them up, define the variables, and show you the answers. How you solve them could have also been different. Some of you may have used graphing, substitution, elimination, and I don't have time to go through all 3 of those things. So for the first one, each of these were worth 8 points. 2 for defining your variables, 2 for setting up your equations correctly, 2 for solving both variables correctly, and then 2 for your answers. So what you use as your variables did not matter. How you define your variables did matter though. So here, this would be current speed and boat speed, river speed and boat speed, speed of boat and speed of river. Any of those were acceptable. If you just put current and boat, I don't know what you're talking about. So make sure you're very specific. Your 2 equations, one was adding, one was subtracting. So b plus c equals 21 and b minus c equals 1. However you solve them is up to you. But then your final answer should have labels. Here we're talking about miles per hour, so this should be 11 miles per hour and 10 miles per hour. So even if you didn't show how you solved and you still got the answer, you still got partial credit. Even if you didn't solve it and you just wrote the variables in the equation, you still got partial credit. Do we have questions about that? So even if you're struggling with the solving piece, try to at least set it up or at least get your variables. The solving piece is not new. Refer back to your elimination, refer back to your substitution, refer back to your graphing. Okay. For number 2, the 2 things we don't know are the price of an adult ticket and the price of a child ticket. You could have used those words exactly. Cost of an adult ticket, cost of a child ticket, adult ticket cost, child ticket cost, adult ticket price, and child ticket price. Any of those were fine. If you just put A equals adult ticket and C equals child ticket, I don't know exactly what you don't know about those. Or if you just put adult and child, I don't know what you don't know about those. So define your variables and be specific. Your 2 equations, you have 6 numbers. All of those numbers get used. So those would be your 2 equations. 11a plus 2c equals 149, and 9a plus 14c equals 295. And then I want to say the answers to those were 14 and 11. I just don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say child was 14. Right? And then make sure you're putting your labels. You're looking for the cost of, so your label should be dollars of some sort. And then again, you could have solved that using any of your methods. questions on that one? Some of you were able to set up 3. Some of you, I think the high school A and high school B, that part confused you. That is just saying there are 2 different high schools so that you know we're comparing 2 different things. But that, again, doesn't really matter because what we really need to focus on is the number of vans, the number of buses with how many students. And then, again, number of vans, number of buses with how many students because we're looking for number of students in the vans and the buses. Number of students in the van, in each van, and number of students in the buses. So if you put number of vans, number of buses, be careful because that's not what it was asking you to find. So then your 2 equations, 3b plus 7b equals 187. And 12b plus 1b equals 154. I want to say it was 22 and something else. I really do not remember. Almost like it's everywhere. When you write down your answer, again, think about it. Does it make sense? If you have more students on a bus than more students in a van, usually buses are bigger than vans, so something's probably wrong there. Can't have negative number of students, so if you get a negative, something's wrong. Can't have decimal number of students, something's wrong. Right? Questions about this one? Or any last minute questions in general? To which one?
Two. Substitution, or like just showing.
Any other last minute questions? Yes. I can show you.
Yeah.
Do you need this scroll down, Christina?
Yeah. Thank you.
Right? So Tuesday is your flex day. If you don't finish, Tuesday is when you're going to finish by default. However, if you have to finish your test on Tuesday, that means less time for you to do retake work, so keep that in mind.